Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ever-popular Meet the Team session. Now, we improved on last year's Meet the Team session tremendously. How did we do that? Who knows how we improved the Meet the Team session this year? Exactly correct. Last year, we made the mistake there was no bar in here.
And food.
Well, yeah, we had food right before, but we didn't bring food into this part. But
Yeah, we did.
oh, we did?
We did bring
Oh, some of the food came over too. Hey, you can eat and drink over here. The other thing that we did that was smarter this year is we actually closed the bar on the other side. Hey, don't steal my elephants. You can't. No.
That's mine.
All right. So here's a couple things. One last pitch. You see these lovely Pac-Man oriented t-shirts? Okay. Lovely Pac-Man oriented. Much better. Okay. Lovely Pac-Man oriented t-shirts. If you're here, you fill out your conference evaluation forms, you get a Pac-Man t-shirt. The other thing that happens from the conference evaluation forms is they all go into a bucket and we draw them out for certain very interesting prizes. I won't say exactly what they are, but they're green, they have ears, and they're larger. Okay? Just saying. Now, you know, just because you can't really solve every problem, you know. Now, I don't know if everybody got one of these. We were kind of giving them away at the end, but I think they're mostly gone now. But what the hell? No fist fight, no fist fight. All right, so we got a couple of elephants just in case something goes horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. The only way this works is if you guys ask questions. What, Andy's leaving? All right, nobody ask any, like, you know, corporate direction questions for a few seconds, but otherwise we'll be okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody down the line to introduce themselves. So, Guy, if you could pass the microphone down this way a little bit.
That's mine.
It's not yours. They're going to introduce themselves, tell you what part of Zend that they're responsible for, and that'll give you some idea of who we're going to direct questions to as we go down the line. So,
You want to go first?
yeah, sure. I'm Kent Mitchell. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management. Also Talking Head, Demo Monkey, and just about anything else that involves being stupid on stage, that's me.
All right, I'm Ida Ben Moshe, and I'm responsible for support, services, and pre-sales consulting.
We got another chair.
Dmitry Stogov, part of Advanced Technology
You want
team,
a chair?
one of the core developers of PHP itself, contributor to some Zend, some key Zend server components, author of some PHP extensions, and researcher.
Hello, I'm Guy Arpaz, Senior Director of Product Management, responsible for Zend Server 6 Beta and Zend Studio.
Zev Surovsky. What part of Zend am I responsible for? Parts of the Zend engine, together with Andy. We build the stuff that Dimitri has to clean up lately.
Never a truer statement was made.
ZE in Zend.
Yeah. And other than that, CTO, and as most recently, count as Chief Photography Officer.
Andy runs engineering, so he's to blame for all the bugs.
No.
Andy Goodman, CEO and co-founder.
Natalia Bartel, I'm the team lead of Zend Studio.
Matthew Wira-Finney, I'm responsible for herding the cats that are the Zend Framework community.
Hi, I'm Boaz Zinneman. I'm in charge of Zend Developer Cloud and some other cloud activities at Zend.
Hi, I'm Debbie Otterstetter, and I'm in charge of the training and certification programs at Zend.
Okay, guys, now comes the part where you're actually responsible for participating. This is where it's a question and answer session. I realize you're all busy drinking, but if you got a question for the Zend team or a question about PHP, Anything you think this group of people can answer, I didn't say correctly, but at least answer. Got to come up to one of the microphones here in the aisleway and ask a question. All right, our first question.
Which one of you is the best beatboxer? No, I'm just kidding.
None of the above.
Okay. So there's a big push on social and cloud. Is there any chance that we'll ever see a cloud-based Zend studio with collaborative editing?
That's actually, it's actually an interesting question. It is technology that we've looked at, and we're trying to figure out, what might happen in the future.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a couple of interesting projects going on right now. Natalia could probably comment on this a little bit more as well, but there's some stuff on the Eclipse side for some web-based editing, and we keep abreast of all those technologies. We don't generally talk about future releases too much, but Natalia, you can talk about from the research side what you guys are seeing and so forth.
So this idea is somewhere deep in our minds. We haven't started planning anything yet, but definitely it's something that we will be trying to research and plan for future. Would you like to use this kind of PHP IDE, the web-based one? Yeah. Any more people interested?
You?
Okay.
Greg, you don't count in the back. Based on your giggling level, you've had at least one too many beers. I'd just like to take that giggle out of Greg's voice. The Giants are ahead, buddy. He's a Dodgers fan. Ooh. Uh-oh.
Don't look so scared. You know this is for you, Matt. All right, so what is your plans, timeline for ZF3? What kind of support are you going to have for 5.4 in it? And what kind of support are you going to need for the community to make that happen?
Excellent. So the timeline that we've been doing for the next major releases is 18 to 24 months. You're not even paying attention, Liz. 18 to 24 months between major releases. And 5.4 support is foremost on our minds because we want to use traits because I'm sick of using the same code over and over again. So yeah, 5.4 is what I have on the roadmap personally. There are some other features that have come up. We've already identified some things that we could have done better with even with ZF2. In terms of having the community do it, I want you all to write it. I don't want to, so go for it. So
what are you going to do if you slip past and 5.5 gets out before ZF3 does?
That's going to happen because we said 18 to 24 months. 5.5 should be next year, so it'll be after that. Fact of the matter is typically the most recent version is not the one that gets adopted right away. It's usually at least a version behind. So
if you're going to keep asking questions, you got to go back to the microphone.
So are you going to block any 5.5 features that people put in stuff? Awesome. So you're going to block any 5.5 features that people might want to put into this branch if it starts going really well?
We'll probably do like we've done with ZF2, where we actually have some traits provided already.
Okay.
We don't use them internally, but they're for public consumption. Mm-hmm. So probably do similar if there are places where we can identify that we can
I'm
do
thinking of the password hashing APIs and stuff that were added.
The way that Enrico has done this so far is that he will check to see if it exists, and we will use it if it's present.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
You sure?
Yes, I'm done now.
You done now?
I'll bug somebody else later.
All right, cool.
Thank you, Liz.
Next question.
I just wanted to actually add, because you asked about ZF 3.0, we actually started a 3.0 branch in an alcohol-induced hackathon
last year. Yeah.
That branch has since been deleted, but I'm actually personally in charge of the 3.0 branch from here forward until we actually make a release, I guess. And so we will be starting that, and that will be maintained with 2.0, and new features will be added there in that branch. So that will be on GitHub very soon.
You thought I was kidding about having the community write it. Thanks, Evan.
Come on, somebody has to have a question. See? I told you.
Hi, Stefan.
Ryan said, uh-oh. So I was wondering why Zend Framework copied over everything from Symfony.
You're assuming that I looked at Symfony.
I know you didn't. No, serious question though. I'm not sure who of you is in charge of that. Is there ever going to be a ZendCon Europe? Because flying here takes a lot of time.
That's a Andy question.
So it's definitely something we've had on our mind. It's it's very hard to put on these kind of conferences. It takes a lot of energy from the company for probably a good 3 to 4 months leading up to the conference. So I would say it's something that's on our wish list because we do think it's important. Actually, from a company perspective, right? We have a lot of presence in Europe, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Ireland. So it's on our wish list, and we want to do it. The only question is when can we actually pull it off?
Somebody's got to ask a question, otherwise she's threatening to get back up.
More questions.
Come on, nobody has a question? I can't believe Zend's doing everything so perfectly you don't have something you want to at least bitch about. See, look, she's getting up.
Here comes Liz.
She's getting up again.
Challenge accepted.
It's all your fault.
Okay, this is a question kind of for Dimitri and the people are doing. I know that for 5.4 you contributed back to the community some really cool performance improvements with PHP. Are you planning on doing that for 5.5, and do you have anything else on the timeline for squeezing a lot more out of PHP?
Actually, 5.5 get a lot of new features, and some of them are generators, which become a big problems for some products. For our products too. And finally, keyword taken from Java. I'm not sure we will get any performance improvements in 5.5, but who knows?
Anyone else? Two people heading towards the mic. Now they're going to fight for the
It's okay, you can queue, that's okay.
Fight, 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 fight.
There's job queue in action. So with JSON becoming more of a popular service communication, web service communication format, are you guys going to give up on SOAP, or will we see SOAP server continue to improve?
Do you mean the SOAP extension in PHP?
Well, just some background. I've had issues, spinning up a SOAP service and Java getting along with it. Mainly due to PHP's lack of strong type, and Java's only option is strong type.
So I can answer part of that in terms of part of that can be answered in userland. I know we've done a lot of work with the Zend SOAP server and Zend framework to try and address communication issues with .NET and Java as well. In terms of the C level, I'll let Zev or Dimitri answer that.
So I would say that I'm not expecting major investment in SOAP, but if the SOAP, we believe that the future is in JSON. But if you do need SOAP, one of the options is actually using the Java bridge, and then you can, from PHP, communicate with Java objects and get all the goodness that you have, depending on the point of view, that allows you to use SOAP from within Java. And it's actually free in Zend Server C, so we can give it a try.
You might answer this by it isn't a new version, but ever since you got from your own developed Zend Studio and into Eclipse, I found everything going slow and slow. And we have code completion dropping out, we have DLTK indexing going haywire, stopping the editor. And I know you've been saying you're working on this, but I've been telling you this for quite some time now.
Have you tried Studio 10 already?
That was my first point. No, but if that's still slow and the DLTK indexing still bogs down, then how fast will you change it?
We will definitely work on that. Yes, we know that performance is the issue of Zend Studio.
Still?
Still?
That's why you don't talk about the future.
So one thing I want to add is that we're actually going to switch gears in our studio development methodology, and instead of seeing a release once a year, we're going to be pushing out more releases throughout the year. And this is, performance and a better experience are going to be one of the focus areas. So it's not as if the next time you should be, if Studio 10 doesn't fit your needs, you wouldn't have to wait for 11. It would be sooner than that.
We're also, just as a side note, we do have a studio advisory team. These are people that get early releases of Zend Studio, provide us with a lot of feedback. If anybody wants to be on the studio advisory team, I'm just going to say send me an email, kent@zend.com. We'll add you to the list. You'll get releases before everybody. Sometimes they'll work flawlessly. Sometimes they will work flawed. But that's what happens when you're in an advisory team.
Really? Sometimes they work flawlessly?
Sometimes.
Okay.
There's a chance.
Theoretical chance.
Theoretically, yeah. Theoretically, they could be flawless. But early, basically it's a way for you to influence it, give us very concrete examples of things that you're wanting us to work on. And I think Natalia's team would welcome any feedback that they can get. Yes?
That's a great segue. As part of that change in how you're going to release new versions of Studio, do you think you'll open the issue tracker and the roadmap to the public?
We're definitely considering it.
Other questions? We get repeat customers all the time.
As a ZCE, I get a free license of Zend Studio and Zend Server.
Yes.
It's like Zend Studio is right now it's 8 the license instead of 9. Will I get for the new Zend Server release that's coming out? Will I get a developer license for that for free or not?
We generally gave out the free license that we gave that was current at that time.
Yeah.
We gave a perpetual license. We don't generally ship out updates to every ZCE, but it's something, I don't know, we could think about, Andy. Do we want to ship updates to every ZCE that gets a free license? It's something we can talk about.
Okay.
Okay.
So a lot of people kind of think of PHP as a slow language compared to a lot of the other web-based languages, and
They're wrong.
I agree. As much as I hate to mention Facebook and their hip-hop compiler that's supposed to improve PHP performance, are there any... I hope I'm not angering anyone, but are there...
We're waiting for this question.
Are there any nifty tricks from that will be brought into core PHP so that the common developer will really be able to get a lot of those benefits of increased performance?
Actually, we do it. And actually, PHP is not a slow language. In case you will compare it with other scripting language, you would find that it's much faster than Python and Perl. Also, a bit faster than Ruby. The only languages who can beat it, it's JavaScript. With new engines like V8, SpiderMonkey, WebKit, and also maybe Lua. And so actually we did an excellent virtual machine. Of course it has some bad design in some places, but...
Thanks, Zev. Hey. Thanks, Zev and Andy. No, that's okay, Dmitry. We can make fun of Zev and Andy.
I believe we have a very good virtual machine. And I also believe that we will do a bit more better.
Yeah, by the way, I think there are a couple of things I would add to that. First of all, we're always looking at performance, both at a runtime and at a system level. And if there's any area that Zev and I are still very, very involved, it's actually the Zend engine and working with Dmitry and trying to see what can be done on performance. I think the biggest challenge is actually not the runtime performance. As Dimitri said, our performance is pretty good. The real challenge is that as you're going into cloud and you're using more web services and you're doing more I/O, the bottleneck is actually really moving from the pure runtime to all the I/O and the services you're actually consuming. So we continue to look at the runtime, but if you're trying to build an optimized system, the runtime is not actually very often not your big bottleneck. It's the database, it's the web services you're consuming, and that's a pretty hard problem to solve for any language.
Yeah, I mean, basically the thing you have to remember about Facebook's situation is they had cached and tuned and tweaked just about everything that was left. And the only thing left for them was to try to increase raw engine performance per se. And they did some amazing stuff with that. But for 99.9% of the applications out there, it's going to make, what is about 5% of your response time, 40% faster. So you respond in 2 seconds, 5% of that's, a few milliseconds, and that's 40% faster. You'll never see it. If you're Facebook and you're running thousands and thousands of servers, this makes a huge difference. But it's, and actually, I've got some friends that work at Facebook, and they say that it's actually made the development more difficult for the developers because the Facebook hip-hop environment is inconsistent with the interactive environment, and they end up with things that work fine when they're developing it that don't run in production properly. So I think it's a great experiment. I think it's done great things for them, but I'm not sure that technology really fits the real world as much. And I think, Andy, that's sort of Andy's point too, that it's going to be web services in the database that are going to be, really your bottlenecks for most of this.
You can actually see that as well in just a regular application. If you have an opcode cache in place, first time you hit it, you're doing 100, 120 milliseconds. Once you get rid of that I/O, you're down to 20 to 30 milliseconds. So the PHP runtime is very fast. It's all the I/O calls that are slowing you down. Eliminate those, you're great, but you have to do some, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard one of the speakers was talking about performance today, and he said he was loading, they were loading a 20 megabyte config file over and over again. That happens way more often than people might be willing to admit in this audience. I mean, somebody's probably done that at some point in their life, and then when they finally realized what they were doing, they went, dope. So, at any rate, but good question, I think, in general, because it is interesting to see how these technologies merge over time. Questions? Don't encourage her. She's going to get up again.
I'll just
See,
throw
look,
it to you now.
There we go.
Hi, guys.
All right.
Hey, this is kind of obviously a question for you, Matthew, and more like want your comments on it. We have a lot of repetition within PHP libraries, and it's almost to the point of ridiculousness. And no one particular person or group, or we're all at fault, so it's nobody's fault. But what are your thoughts in general about the future of PHP libraries and what the roadmap is potentially for less repetition? And just to bring one out, right, we have lots of frameworks. And for example, every framework has a request object. And everyone has a different request object. And of course, there's routing and response and everything else behind that. So what are your thoughts on that? It's a very difficult thing to solve, right? Because each individual frameworks don't really have any incentive to be working together. But as a community, it would be better for us if they were working together. So just wanted your general thoughts on that.
So repetition, is it always bad? Because sometimes people do things in a slightly different way that are innovative or that fit the philosophy of the project better. So repetition isn't bad per se, but yeah, you want to reduce it. In cases like that, it's not something to solve at the framework level. That's something to solve at the PHP level. If we need a certain level of abstraction that everybody's using, we need to probably do it in the fastest way possible, and so you want to do it at the C level. And PECL HTTP answers some of that, but not all of it, because that's really made for requesting out to services and everything. In terms of actually getting the incoming, we need some sort of abstraction around that. That said, that's just one example. There are other cases. Caching and logging are the examples where everybody does it. But if you look at the different implementations, quite often there's something quite different about the philosophies of how those are accomplished. There's been some movements towards common interfaces, and I can see it, but I don't. Because at the same time, I can see the discussions around it. In every discussion, you can see that there are some really innovative ideas. Some make sense in some contexts, others make sense in other contexts. So I think repetition is okay because it's also innovative. It drives new solutions at times. Would I like to see less of it? Yeah. And especially now with things like Composer, Pyrus's pair, and FAR packaging, it makes it easy to reuse those libraries. And the interesting part about it is it doesn't even have to be the entire library, just little bits and pieces. I was building a module for Zend Framework recently, and I wanted to utilize some different things. So I ended up utilizing 3 different components from Zend Framework 2. I got a component that does basically implements Geshe, so the generic syntax highlighter. Another one that was giving me a HTML purifier, and I was able to just cobble all that together. I had a couple hundred lines of code, and I had a nice paste bin. You can do that now. So I think the low-level abstractions are still okay at times, but if we really need that level of abstraction, we need to go to PHP and develop it there in the language itself. Good question.
Got to be more questions out there. Somebody doesn't get up, she's
We got 20 minutes. Come on, people.
Look, see? I told you.
If you don't ask, she will.
So back to the fiasco that was PHP 6. Do we have any kind of a roadmap for what we're going to do for any kind of a Unicode string class or anything like that that's built on ICU so people can do some manipulation of, Unicode strings in an easy manner? Because right now, yeah, you can do it all with UTF-8, but there are a lot of APIs that require more than that.
Right now, we don't have any plans about Unicode strings. We did some improvements with MB string extension, and right now it's maybe compiled dynamically and just included from PHP 9.
All right, so I have a bug that's outstanding right now that I can tell you about. We can't use any of the we can't use any of the Windows Unicode APIs, for example. So if you have a Unicode string in a file name on Windows, you're screwed. You can't access it with PHP. How are we going to get around some of these issues?
Can I just ask a quick question? Have you checked the internationalization extension, the one that wraps ICU?
You still can't get at a file with a Unicode file name on Windows.
Why would you be on Windows?
Now that's a really good question.
Unfortunately, a good share of the intranet applications that are written for PHP are written on Windows.
I was just kidding. There's no like 8.3 equivalent of the file name that you can get?
What?
There's no like 8.3 equivalent of the file name that you can get?
Use a mic. Unfortunately, no.
No? Okay. It's not interesting for you, no.
This question is actually for Matthew. Dealing with Zend Framework 2 and being such a massive project, and also having to deal with Zend's requirements as well, how are you able to really coordinate the community with Zend's objectives as well?
Well, I just assigned my team to Zend's objectives. Seriously, that's really how it happens typically. If there's something that Zend is wanting us to incorporate, then we do that. At the same time, everything we do gets reviewed. So it eventually comes down the line. Everybody sees it. More eyes helps, makes it better anyway. So, but yeah, that's how we deal with it.
Somebody looks like
fresh
they're
blood.
Heading for the microphone. Whoever gets there first, come on, hurry, hurry.
Run, 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 run.
You got there first. You go first.
Thanks. I've got a question for Matthew with relation to migrating or switching or changing from Zend Framework 1 to Zend Framework 2. We're currently at the stage where we're looking at migrating our Zend Framework 1 application. And what strategies would you recommend? Do you recommend just a clean break or some form of progressive enhancement or anything like that?
So I've actually talked to a number of people over the last few days. Some people are asking that same question. Others have done it already. First off, if you're actually crafting SQL in your controllers, you're going to have a lot of work to do first. But really what it does come down to is if you can get a nice clean break of the model and the controller stuff, the MVC stuff is really easy to migrate. So the successful migrations that I've heard people talk about in the last few days is that they have made sure they had a service layer that they were calling directly from their controllers. They actually migrated that stuff to ZF2 because that was, you can have ZF2 and ZF1 running in the same request, no problem. One is namespaced, one's not. It just works. So they're able to migrate the service layer to ZF2 and then migrate the rest of the MVC after that. And it's relatively straightforward. I've heard probably about 7 different success stories just today on that sort of thing. And it just works. That's about the best advice I can give you right now. I've been gathering a lot of input over this the last month or so that I can try and come up with a white paper of some sort. But that's boiling it down right there.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, so my question is I've been noticing a lot of libraries nowadays are using Java-style options for, I walked up and I completely forgot what I was calling it. Guys? Annotations, sorry. Annotations. It's a fairly simple way to just add a little thing to your code. It magically wraps and does all those things. And they're all doing it hopefully before, they're building something out of it, another class or some sort of wrapper or proxy. Is there any ideas or roadmap to actually making that part of the language to just be able to enable some annotation?
I'm going to jump on this. There might be others who want to do it as well. So right now, the kind of the standard for it is Doctrine Common has an annotations library that works within the PHP doc. I personally think that's just fine. But I know there are some people who would really like to have an annotation, like actual language within it. My feeling is that that is adding a complexity to the language already. We have something like 5,000 functions out there, and now you want us to learn another syntax on top of it. If you look at the annotations the way that Doctrine Common did it, it's just JSON, which all of us can probably program in our sleep, right? So to me, that seems quite reasonable. That said, we don't get the performance enhancements that you get from having it at the language level. So I know there are some that are going to keep pushing for it. I also know that there's a few over here who would really hate to see that and are going to vote it down every time. So it's a question of pragmatism and how many people are going to be utilizing the feature. So.
Thanks.
So far, Matthew, king of the questions.
Hi. I've got a question regarding PHP Cloud. Basically, what I'm looking for is a solution where companies develop their applications, and instead of just deploying stuff to the cloud, I would like to see like a staging environment in front of them before they can actually run their applications already in production, so it can be tested thoroughly also before it goes into production. Is there a way to enable this?
So basically what you're talking about, that's the idea behind PHP Cloud, to have some kind of a simple environment that you can bring up pretty easily, that is free or cheap, very cheap, to allow you to run very close to your a production environment. So basically it's running on the same type of machine, using same Zend server, same everything. So I don't see really any problem using PHP Cloud the way it is today for staging.
No, but for a professional level, you first want to have like a isolated environment that could run your automated test, and then you want to have it like an acceptance server where end user can approve your application project before it actually gets pushed to the cloud.
So basically you're looking for more features in PHP Cloud, like integration and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So by the way, maybe I can just interject here. So there's 2 different things under the PHP Cloud umbrella. One is Zend Developer Cloud, We're basically giving you a single container. And the other piece are all the production support that we have, right? So we have Amazon CloudFormation, we have RightScale, right? You saw VMware in the keynote, Red Hat OpenShift. The developer cloud is for development.
Yeah.
You're talking about staging and production, and we believe staging and production there should be a lot of symmetry between those two environments.
Well, basically, you should be able to switch them off.
Right. So RightScale has some really nice options of actually starting a production-like environment. You can even clone that. So they can take an existing infrastructure and clone it. So they're a really good partner of ours and help automate the staging environment and help actually move to production. There are other ways to do it a bit more manually with like Amazon CloudFormation, which we support. So we give you a CloudFormation template. And you can test in an environment which is pretty much identical to what the production environment is. It's actually a big benefit of the cloud, where it doesn't cost you too much to actually set up a staging environment that's pretty much identical to production, because you can just bring it up for a few hours and then kill it, and you're paying a few cents.
But you're still depending on what other parties are actually delivering on that.
But that's actually our goal. Our goal is to enable you on any cloud that you want to deploy on, and to partner with companies who are creating those options for you. So we don't want to, just go to the extreme, right? If you go to Windows Azure, you have to run on their cloud. That's pretty much the strategy, right? Our goal is to enable you with a consistent environment across as many clouds as possible.
Yeah, okay.
So, RightScale does a really nice job of dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Andy, also, you could do something very similar with the VMware vFabric application directory that we showed in the keynote, because you can have a standard blueprint and then you can mix it in with different deployment configurations. So you might be able to say, gee, for acceptance testing, I want to run a 2-server cluster. For load testing, I want to run a 4-server cluster. And in production, I'm going to have an elastic, up to 10-server type configuration. You could have one standard blueprint and mix it in with those different things. If there's we sort of draw a line from development, and then we say once it passes out of development, and maybe basic acceptance testing is still sort of a development function, and you could use a container in Dev Cloud for that, as long as performance wasn't the issue. But when you start getting into scalability testing and true staging, where you're going to really test things, that's...
Well, you want to test, basically, you want to have like a production environment isolated for your testers.
Right.
Otherwise, you have tests that,
Right, and essentially what you need is you need to replicate your production environment, and that's not really one of the goals of PHP Cloud right now, of the Dev Cloud. That kind of thing is actually better done in your production cloud, whatever that is, Amazon, wherever it's going to be. And in fact, what a lot of people do is they stage out a new version, they test it, and then they just sort of swap the IPs and databases underneath it, and it goes live. So there's a lot of different ways, and I think the cloud changes the way people approach some of these problems. But it's not a design goal of ours to handle multi-server type environments from the Dev Cloud.
Yeah.
For now.
It is a requirement that I see more and more within the enterprise and government industry, that you need to have these kind of environments, because the quality assurance part is still a big issue, and having talked and seen all the presentations, it is something that I felt left out during these discussions. So.
Interesting. Okay, that's good feedback. And I think one of the things that you're going to see evolve pretty interestingly over the next probably year or so is private cloud. People have been talking about private cloud for a long time, but how many people really have a private cloud or have actually ever even seen one? People talk about it, but a lot of times it's just VMware instances there. Yeah. Any other questions? Really? This is the gentlest meet the team session we've had in like 5 years. I like the beer in the back. It's softening everybody out, Elaine. This is a good move on our part. You give them beer, they're much happier. Look. Somebody's coming. Back to the mic. One more time.
Any recommendations for configuring continuous integration testing or anything like that along those lines?
I think Natalia has the most experience with that.
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of actually.
And Matthew as well.
If you If your repository is on GitHub, I honestly can't recommend Travis CI enough. Partly because of all the stuff that they've done for all the open source projects out there. Fantastic job. In terms of something that you can run within your own organization, Jenkins is amazing in terms of that. I've seen so many people set that up in minutes and be able to get feedback immediately that they're able to operate on.
And Natalia, we do continuous integration on the
She's
studio.
saying no.
The only thing I would add to that is what we've done in Zend Server, as I said in the keynote, is we really enabled to automate the whole environment, automate the provisioning, automate the deployment, automate the configuration. So actually one of the things we did do internally is we had the Java SDK, you remember? Last year that we announced around wrapping the web services for Zend Server. And you can actually use those to automate either that or command line scripts to automate the PHP stack within a continuous integration environment. So you're basically taking both the PHP stack and the application itself that's being deployed.
Okay. Other questions?
I have hopefully a fun one. At the language, business, and more library framework level, what's the one thing that you guys are most excited about from a growth perspective? You roll out of bed and you're like, we're going to implement this and it's going to kick ass and we're going to take all this market share from X, Y, or Z. So on those three levels, just like to hear what you guys are excited about.
Well, I think
He said framework too, by the way, so get ready.
Well, I think mobile is a big thing because I think what mobile is doing is it's shaking up how companies are thinking about building applications. And I think we've had incumbents in a lot of organizations that haven't really moved for the past 10 years. And I think the market now is forcing those companies to basically rethink how they're going to develop. And I think that's a very exciting opportunity for the PHP community because I think that shakeup is actually putting PHP in a very good spot. And there is a kind of a macro disruption that's forcing that change within companies. So that's a high-level answer, but I really think that's what's happening, and that's really what's shaking up development and moving a lot of companies to dynamic languages when, 10 years ago, everyone was poo-pooing dynamic languages. Actually, I think they were called scripting languages back then, and they weren't any good.
And they were slow. Oh, wait, not really, but.
Yeah, this one's for Matthew. Zend Framework 2 has recently gone stable. So which bit are you most proud of, and which bit do you dislike the most?
Which of your children is ugly, Matthew?
Yeah. So nice. What am I most proud of? That's a good question. I think for me, the personal accomplishment of throwing things over the fence and then just kind of giving some prototypes and people running and doing amazing jobs. Evan was up here talking about 3.0 earlier. If you didn't see his talks earlier, he did the module manager. I basically gave this MVC prototype last year, and it's like, I've got this vague idea about modules, and he went and ran with it. And there were so many things like that throughout. I think the thing that hit me most was just before we went stable, I was giving training to the pro services group, and I'd written an application for a Dutch PHP conference earlier this year, and I needed to refactor it to be the stable version. And I was able to get rid of something like, a third of the code, because we now had simplified so many things and made them consistent. And seeing how hydrators were working across forms and table gateway, and the annotations made it so I didn't have to write all the code that I had already written. I was able to toss it, which was fantastic. So I'm really proud of, we made something consistent, which was what I really was aiming for. So I think that's the best achievement that we could have possibly done. The things we could have done better, I think we should have gotten rid of a lot sooner, to be honest. That's really the best answer I can give right there. I think we made a decision kind of fairly late in the game to take things out of the repository. That should have been made a year ago. So.
As a follow-up assuming that Zend Framework is a net benefit to Zend. So, sorry, as a follow-up to that, I'm assuming that Zend Framework is a net benefit to Zend, the company. So this is mainly for Andy and maybe Zev. I see one of the biggest weaknesses of Zend Framework 2 is the documentation. And you guys hire 3 guys for development, but 0 for documentation. Have you thought about hiring a document guy for Zend Framework 2?
Wait, shouldn't developers write docs?
No. You don't want to read developer docs.
So you should answer. Yeah, so
Fight.
Try and get the Yeah, so we absolutely think that, you know, enabling Zend Framework has a few aspects. It's got documentation, samples, training, you know, all sorts of stuff. We always feel we're not doing enough. So we're kind of on the same page. We try. We do have the developers actually work quite a bit on the documentation. We've obviously done the training course, which has also taken, you know, quite a bit of time. I think there's more we could do. So I don't have a great answer for you, except that, you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, whatever we can do in the limited resources we have.
I shall keep an eye out what happens in the
We do, but by the way, there have been some community contributors also who've done it.
Like you.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So
someone wrote this Gate tutorial.
Yeah, so there's some really good stuff that's coming in the community, like from you. And you know, if there are ways that you think we can better encourage that throughout the community, definitely let us know some ideas. Beyond that.
In case you don't know who this is Rob Allen, or Acrobat, who wrote the Zend Framework tutorial and then later the Zend Framework 2 tutorial, so he's got a vested interest. Well, now you guys are queuing up.
No, I just wanted to follow up on that. It's a friggin' open source project, so the community is responsible for it as well, just as much as Zend is.
Yeah, and actually we had a push this past month because you know there's recognition that a lot had to be done, and it was amazing. I put out a call and we actually like made a list of tasks, and we had like 3 contributors that busted through an immense amount of documentation in like 2 weeks. So like the 2.0.2 documentation versus 2.0.3, there's like night and day difference. So yeah, kudos to everybody who helped with that.
Especially Robert Basic.
Yeah, Robert Basic. He was like a one-man documentation machine.
So I had a question. I'm pretty engaged in the Zend Framework community.
Thank you, Lorna.
Matthew, you got a personal beer delivery person?
This is awesome.
That's impressive. I mean, think about all the things that Matthew has fame for, but personal beer delivery person. That's impressive.
Okay, so I'm pretty engaged in the Zend Framework community, and it took me by surprise when I saw Zend come out with a Zend Framework 2 training package. I don't know who these people were that were working on it. I don't know how the hell they even knew about Zend Framework 2 or anything about it when they were not engaged with the community. There was no communication there at all. It just seemed completely disconnected. So I'm wondering if you have thought about you know, these people that are involved. I know Matthew has served as a bridge there to help with that a little bit, but have you thought about having those people creating that curriculum be more engaged in the community and involved and help create more of a connection there?
I'll just jump in for just very quickly, but I'm going to hand it to Debbie in a second here. I've been encouraging those involved to actually be a little bit more involved. Part of it is restrictions on their time because they're actually juggling as many balls, if not more, than I am. So yeah, they're doing the best they can, but yeah, I turned over to Debbie now. Sorry.
Hi. Yeah, so when we put together the Zend Framework 2 class, we worked closely with Kevin Schroeder and Doug Beer and Clark Everett, who are 2 of our Zend Framework 1 instructors. And then we tied into Matthew's team. We were trying to get something out as quickly as possible because there was a lot of demand and a lot of need for it. We've since then gone through a second rev of it, So there's a new class that's going on now, and Ben was involved in helping us write some of that. But as much involvement as we can get in the community, that would be terrific, and I would love to hear from you if you want to get involved and help us improve the class, because it is something that's needed. It's extremely popular, and we've had to add multiple classes, so there's a huge need for it, and we could certainly use the need of the community or the efforts of the community to improve it.
Okay, thank you. So a general, I guess, PHP language type of question in terms of what you guys are thinking. So there were two questions that were asked before. One was in relation to, I guess, Facebook and their compiler, and the other one was annotation. And I think one of the common threads between the two of those is, reducing some of PHP's, flexibility when it comes to typing in a general concept. So now, recognizing different types as being separate as far as memory optimizations or ability to better compile and optimize the language in terms of the execution stream. So just what's your general feel in terms of that eventually making its way into one of the future versions of PHP?
They have to discuss it, for.
I think his answer is might be different than mine. So go ahead. So I absolutely love strong typing, and I think it belongs in the future version of PHP. Not. I don't think it belongs in the future version of PHP. I campaign against it heavily, as you know. Personally, I don't think we should be making substantial changes to the language behavior in order to gain performance, unless it's like an amazing trade. And even then, I would consider it, very heavily before I would go for it. Like Andy said, I think that the bottlenecks are actually moving away from PHP being the bottleneck to other things being the bottleneck. So, strong typing might get you, I don't know, X% faster, but I think it's much more important, the developer productivity is actually much more important, and I think it's going to reduce it. That said, we are experimenting with all sorts of, experimenting and thinking about all sorts of creative ideas that don't actually take away the dynamic nature of the language, that don't actually change the syntax, but where we can try to analyze the code and, like, in a loop where we obviously see an integer, optimize it, but without the user actually defining I as an int.
I think it might be better to introduce something like optional typing. And in this case, the user can decide yourself if he like more dynamic or he care about performance.
I guess the only other point to that is, performance is certainly one aspect, but the other piece of it is, making the language be more obvious in terms of what the functions and methods are taking in, and that's, I guess, the common solution that people use annotations for, to identify what types are coming into the data and, generating either documentation or whether it's WSDL documents or not based on that information. So, perhaps that's where the optional type hinting comes in, but.
Yeah. So, first of all, I think it's optimistic to think that something that was a thread for probably like a few months we were able to really tackle here. But in general, I think that something like the auto-conversion, type hints, or whatever we call them, could do something like that. I'm actually not against it, but I think that some of the guys that actually submitted the original patch of the stronger typing were like, okay, no, if we're not going to get that, then we might as well not get anything. I don't know. The future will tell, and we can discuss it later on.
All right,
We also I found actually reflection has gotten so fast at this point that if I need to reflect over the annotations, it's not that bad at runtime. So, to me, it's a user land problem.
Hi, everybody. My question is, are you going to implement database migrations like E framework does for Zend framework?
Actually, Rob Allen, who was up here earlier, had written a migrations layer for Zend Framework 1 that somebody ported into a Zend Framework 2 module. Rob, what's the name of that? He's coming up. So somebody's actually written that. The other part is Ralph Schindler up here is going to be writing a DDL abstraction, which is going to make migrations much simpler. So the library that already exists will be able to make use of that in a much better fashion. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
To answer the question, I wrote a migration system for Zend Framework 1. I wrote a migration system for Zend Framework 1. And David from Papyrsoft has ported it to straight PDO, and it's called South for the Winter. So Google on GitHub for South for the Winter, and you get a really good migrations left system. And it works across all PHP.
David, are you here? No? Okay. I was going to have him raise his hands.
Just another Zend Framework question. Do you know if Zend Framework 2 will have Zend PDF come back?
I don't know. So somebody asked this earlier today. So Zend PDF requires that you know the PostScript format basically inside and out, and the fact of the matter is you need to spend a lot of time studying that to do something effective. Right now, nobody on my team really knows that, and there are a couple of people, there's probably about 3 different groups in the community who have said that they're going to tackle it, and nothing has come of it. So it's kind of low priority for us right now. There are a couple of good libraries out there for that. TCP PDF is fairly good, and what's the other one I'm trying to remember? I can't remember, PDFlib, I think, or something like that. They're reasonable, and you can use them right now. The problem, of course, is licenses, and that was one of the nice parts about us. We had a BSD license that you could use. If somebody wants to step up and contribute it, I'll take it. It is in a separate repository for right now, and if anybody wants to take on that job, they can do that, and we will merge it back in if it becomes stable.
Cool, thanks.
This is a question about Zend Server, which I've been following for a while. It's really cool, but it has a lot of great tools that I'd really like to utilize. But the requirements of the applications I'm working on right now dictate that I use Nginx instead of Apache. So what is the possibility that we could see alternative web server integration like Nginx instead of Apache with Zend Server?
Okay, so we actually have Zend Server working on top of Nginx in our labs. So talk to us. Come talk to us after the session, and we'll get you hooked up. I'm not sure when exactly we're actually going to deliver it as a, as a part of the product in GA, but at some point it will definitely happen, and it's already working.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, from product management perspective, there's a lot of input that we'd like to get from customers that are interested in Nginx. For example, like basic questions like, do you want us to supply a copy of Nginx? Do you want to build your own? Those kinds of things, which, we don't have as much experience working with Nginx people as we do with Apache, and so there's a lot of input we need to help us even design what the right actual delivery would be for that. So I encourage you to seek us out and give us your feedback.
Thanks.
Okay?
All right, I guess I'll just kind of keep this fun. So there's really a couple of big web scripting languages. There's PHP, of course. There's Python and some other big one. If you could just say, in 5 words, what's the one killer feature that PHP will have in the next 5 years that will destroy those other languages?
More jobs?
He's still standing there.
Okay, first of all, I agree completely with Andy. Great answer. I don't think that such a killer feature exists. I'll tell you something else. I don't think it's going to kill any other language. It's a huge ecosystem. Essentially, pretty much all software today is being written in the web. It's inconceivable that there would be just one language. PHP is huge. Our goal is to keep it huge. Not necessarily to come up with something very, very disruptive at the language level that will kill the other contenders.
And there's already something.
But I like Andy's version better.
There's already something there. PHP was written for the web. All the others are having to, they're general purpose languages that are doing kludges so that they can be used on the web.
The other big one I forgot was Ruby and Rails. So.
I thought you just didn't want to mention it.
By the way,
by the
way, just to keep things in perspective, they're way smaller. PHP is really in a class of its own size-wise. The and I think, personally, I don't think that PHP is even really all that competing with Python and Ruby. There's a huge market out there. PHP is huge in it. Python is big. Ruby is kind of big, and that's fine.
So I've been told that we have the hook, but there is good news for all of you who wanted to get into the hackathon and couldn't. It appears that there might be a couple more hackathon slots left, so if you want to head over to where the hackathon is, it's starting now. You could probably sneak in, continue your free beer consumption, because that is part of the hackathon. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. Anybody who's going to throw the last of the elephants out into the audience, please do so. Oh, he dropped it. He dropped it. That's like the baseball game or the foul ball. All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.